So the Andrew case out of Oklahoma raises this final question that we've kind of been teeing up both in the Cruz case and in the Borgelli case. We know that one of the requirements for a statement to be offered in a co-conspirator statement to be offered against one of the co-conspirators is that it must be made during the course of the conspiracy. And we just looked at that question in the McLuda case. And we saw that if the conspiracy has already ended, then even efforts to cover it up are not statements that are then offered against the are admissible or not admissible against the co-conspirators. It has to be during the course of the original conspiracy. The other question, though, that's a part of 801 D2E co-conspirator statements is that the statement must be in furtherance of the conspiracy. Now, what does that mean? Obviously, if I'm robbing a bank and during the course of the staging of the robbery, immediately before it happens, someone calls me on the cell phone and says, you know, is George there and does George have a gun? And I say, he's here and he has a gun. Well, then that's a statement of fact that, you know, he is there and he does have a gun. But it also furthers the conspiracy because relating that underlying fact to one of my co-conspirators or even to others potentially allows the conspiracy to go further. Now, a lot of times that a co-conspirator statement could be admissible under any other possible theory as well. Is George there and does George have a gun? You could offer that as a co-conspirator statement when I say, yes, he's here and yes, he has a gun, but you could also offer it to show the effect on the hearer. That the person is now willing to come and participate in the robbery because he knows that backup is there, that there are other conspirators who are there who are armed. There are often other ways other than co-conspirator exception that will allow the statement to come in. And that's certainly true in the Andrew versus State case that we're looking at today from the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals. Just for your kind of, you know, knowledge of the court structure, in two states, Texas and Oklahoma, the Oklahoma Court of Appeals is the highest, Oklahoma and Texas, their Court of Criminal Appeals is the highest court to hear criminal cases in both those jurisdictions. Both Tennessee and Alabama have Court of Criminal Appeals, but those are intermediate appellate courts. In Oklahoma and Texas, they're the highest courts to hear criminal cases. So the Andrew case, this is a case in which a wife kills her husband because she's got a new lover. The new lover's name is Pravat. We know that we know him by his last name, and here are statements that Pravat is offering, and you know Pravat is one of the conspirators in the killing of Mr. Andrew, and so there are two sets of statements that we're looking at. One, Pravat tells his daughter to call Mr. Andrew and tell him that he needs to go because his wife is in the hospital, you know, a long distance away, and Pravat had cut the brake lines to Andrew's car. So in telling his daughter to call Mr. Andrews and have him drive a long distance when Pravat had cut the brake line, that is a classic, easy, unmistakable statement in furtherance of the conspiracy by one of the conspirators. Pravat tells his daughter, call this guy, have him drive hundreds of miles after he cut his brake lines. And so that's in furtherance of, clearly in furtherance of Pravat's effort to kill Andrew. That one's easy. But what about this statement that Pravat says to his daughter, that crazy woman is trying to get me to kill her husband? So that's not a statement that is trying to get her to do anything. It's a reporting of something that Mrs. Andrew had done. She tried to get Pravat to kill her husband. In what sense is that in furtherance of the conspiracy? In what sense is that not merely relating an historical fact. Well, this shows you how creative courts can be in regarding something as being in furtherance of the conspiracy. The court says, well, Pravat could have told his daughter that Mrs. Andrew was trying to get her to kill her husband, to see what kind of approach he would then have to take when he later asked his daughter to call Mr. Andrew and have him drive hundreds of miles, after the brake line was cut. So this was sort of testing her reaction to a possible conspiracy to kill Mr. Andrew. Crazy. This is a crazy story, obviously, and Mrs. Andrew and Pravat met exactly where you'd expect two co-conspirators to murder. To me, they both co-taught the same Sunday school class in Oklahoma. I mean, this really is something out of Dateline, and what was waiting in the closet when they arrived. So this is one of these crazy stories that you see on TV. And the question is, what amounts to something in furtherance of the conspiracy? Can you relate a historical fact in a way that could be said to advance the conspiracy? And in fact, you can. If you can show, but you have to be able to show that relating that historical fact in some way advances the conspiracy. It lays the groundwork for something else. Now, if it's simply the verbal act, call him and have him drive 100 miles where his wife is supposedly in a hospital, which she wasn't. Have him tell him his wife is in the hospital and that he needs to get there immediately. That is obviously in furtherance of the conspiracy, but it's also a verbal act. So as I say, many times, you will get things that satisfy a number of exceptions or a number of things that will allow something to be defined as not being hearsay. That was, in fact, call him and tell him to go quickly to his wife in the hospital. That's a verbal act, and it's also a statement in furtherance of the conspiracy. The relating of the historical fact, his wife tried to get me to kill her husband, that is not necessary. That's not a verbal act. So we have to find some other way to bring that in. And that can be, as the court said here, because that's laying the foundation for something else that would be in furtherance of the conspiracy. That statement itself then is in furtherance of the conspiracy.